Today on the Anthony Walsh Show, I have a chance to sit down with UFC legend, the hooligan, Paddy Houlihan. We talk about the early years, how he got a start in mixed martial arts, how himself and Conor McGregor redefined the mixed martial arts landscape in Ireland. This is an absolute belter of a conversation. Not everybody is ready to hear it, but if you are ready, get ready to go deep. It's Mr. Paddy Houlihan. Paddy Houlihan, welcome.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, we're well into episode 440 probably by the time this comes out. And it's our first in person.
I think if I look at another screen with a zoom on it, I'm going to get sick.
Yeah, no, I think everyone's feeling that way. The pendulum has to swing both ways though. And we were talking off air before can you say that off air when it's in person? I suppose it is still. We were talking off air about the pendulum and these sensationalist headlines. And you had your podcast and you discontinued it. In part because of these sort of snippets and sound bites that people are taking and then making them into big headlines. I think that's super prevalent, and we're seeing it even with Joe Rogan and it happening to him. But I always think the pendulum swings both ways, and it'll swing back the other way to sensibility and long-form conversations, and that's why I still love the podcast. Some things can't be put in a container. A complex issue can't be reduced to 500 words.
No, 100. So even the podcast I think you're mentioning there is a mixture of two podcasts, and it's one of them is 3 hours long, so it's like for the pendulum swinging there, that's crazy, because I was only talking to someone had mentioned the pendulum, and I'd said this, I said, I feel like there's kind of like there's a change on the horizon or something, and they said the pendulum has to swing all the way up and then it has to come back and find balance. And I was like, has it ever found balance? Because that's the world I want to live in.
Yeah, it swings on everything. I'm looking at the level of inactivity people had and how they prioritise stuff in their life. They prioritised. I love generalisations because that's all we have time for.
Yeah.
But for a long time, a large part of society, they prioritise this chase for something in the distance, a mirage. I'll be happy when. The Stoics call it the hedonic treadmill. I'll be happy when I get to this invisible thing in the distance. Most of the time it was monetary stuff, houses, cars, clothes, watches. But the pandemic was a little bit of a reset on that, and people and said, hold on, you can't walk around 20, 30 kilograms overweight. You're gonna, if a pandemic doesn't get you, a strong breeze is gonna get you. You need to look after yourself.
100%. I think John Laddie, who actually introduced me to yourself,
great man, had him on the podcast. He's a top lad.
John's a great man, and it is. We can't have conversations here people get offended these days, where offended used to be part of free speech, basically. So it was kind of like a byproduct of it. Now, I ain't about offending people. Let me tell you, I would fight teeth and nail to defend somebody who was trying to defend them. But sometimes it can get a little bit. You can't have a conversation now because you are going to offend someone. So say John would have been pointing out the idea that heart disease and stuff like that is a massive killer in this country, and in all countries all over the world, and people who smoke and drink a lot and don't exercise, and but that's the truth. That's not saying that, but that could offend somebody because it would feel like someone was pushing them to do something they didn't want to. I'm about choice and a lot of stuff. So if you want to eat 10 burgers a day, eat your heart out. That's what I said. If you want to run 20 marathons in 20 days, eat your heart out, So I'm a lot about choice. I'm
normally of the opinion that I don't really care what you're doing. The legal code and my moral code don't line up totally aligned. And no matter what you want to do, have at it. If you're not hurting someone else in the process and it's making you happy, have at it. But the thing that, me and John Lally talked about a little bit on the podcast, where both of us took a little bit of offence, I'm projecting here a little bit, but I'm assuming you're in the same boat, that health and fitness and both mental and physical health, it's such a huge part of your life. It's 24/7, it's 365. It's not a pill, it's not an injection, it's not an afterthought. So you can't have someone coming along, or the only times I took offence during the pandemic were people coming along and virtue signalling to me saying, you're not healthy because you didn't take this injection. And it's like, hold on, don't talk to me about health. I was weighing me oatmeal this morning.
Yeah. That's serious, yeah. Weighing oatmeal, you're going deep. So here's something we probably haven't, this is well, not saying exclusive, but something I haven't disclosed, right? So I'm obviously in the council, and let me tell you, I get to see virtue at its finest. Hypocrisy and virtue go hand in hand. That's what I'm starting to realise, because I have factor 13 deficiency. I couldn't take this injection or this jab or whatever.
So what's a factor 13
So
deficiency?
factor 13 deficiency is basically a blood disorder. It's why I had to retire from the UFC. It's a clotting problem. So basically all of the factors come except the last one, which seals the clot in place, which makes it a little bit dangerous. And so I made a decision after doing research on this, but not even on what the vaccine was, but what on mRNA was, the process of administrating the vaccine. So I had about 2 years there where, because I have a medical condition, that I ended up in a place in society that I probably thought I never would. I couldn't go in and have a coffee in a place or sit down in a place because I had a medical condition. But they were, and no one would have a problem saying to me, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, and like saying it to me face. And you could have 2-3 people saying it. But the same people would be the people who would be virtue signaling in the next conversation. So I couldn't take an injection. So we was in a situation where people who would be who would scream about inclusive and against like discrimination and rightly so, had no problem in a few weeks turning all of them morals around, and basically I felt alienated, and I'm sure other people did, not even over medical conditions or over why they could, because maybe the reason they didn't want to take it or they didn't want to do what somebody was saying what they should do, and not only that, without facts. So it wasn't like someone had a piece of scientific paper saying, here's all the facts, here's all the knowledge, and you're going against science now because we've done all of the research.
It's the same. I had friends who he recovered from cancer, and he was advised not to take the injection because of whatever type of cancer that he had, that it might interfere with his rehab, and again ostracized from society. And you know, we didn't chat, and you probably don't know too much about my background. I came through law school before I went away to pursue a career as a pro cyclist. And I remember one of the cases in law school that always stuck with me. Can't remember the case name, but that's not important. The story, it's basically there's 3 lads out on a fishing boat. The fishing boat loses its way badly. One of the lads on the boat gets very sick. Now they're at a point where they're going to die if, I think it was agreed in the trial, they're going to die if they don't eat. There was no way of catching fish out there before some smart arse asks. They didn't have a rod, they had no bait.
That's what I was going to ask.
So they decided they were going to eat one of the lads. So one of the lads, the weakest, he was the sickest, and he got eaten. And it came to trial, and they were charged with homicide, and their defence came back and said it was necessity. They were all going to die if they didn't eat them. And they were found guilty of homicide because the judge said the function of society is to protect the weak from the strong. And that's what I thought about during that time when people like you with medical conditions were getting excluded from society. The function of society is to protect the people who are getting excluded. And we miss that sometimes. We miss that around homelessness. We miss that around people rehabilitating from drug problems, people with mental health problems. We exclude those and we step over them on the street.
They still do. There's like, I think it was like 115 homeless people died. So I would do a lot with groups with the homeless, and like, listen, I kind of facilitate. That's what I say with helping the homeless in a way, because there's absolute angels out there who are on them streets all of the time. That's not me. Every now and again I get to go out, and I'm blessed to be able to be around like powerful souls, because people that are in homeless situations, when you sit and talk to these people and all, you start seeing that they're a lot stronger than a lot of people that you might actually know, because they're forced, they have to battle the elements, they have to understand, but they're living in a different world because their need for what they have to get, whether it's food or whether it's to support an addiction or anything like that, that becomes their life. Their life is no longer, people are like, why don't they just get up and do a 9-to-5 job? It's like they live in a different realm, but it's because society failed them. Like we treated drug addiction and alcoholism and all this kind of stuff as like a criminal behaviour, and basically stuff like that. Where it's known now that it's like addiction is a sickness, and it's a human thing. It's a mortal thing, if you get me. You know, like, so where you have somebody, you have the possibility of somebody being able to get addicted to, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs and stuff like that. But society looks at them people as like, oh, like that's your own fault now. But that's not the way we should be looking at these people. Like, and when it comes to, say, what you're saying, homeless and stuff like that, it's like, these people are some of the strongest people and some of the smartest people that you'll ever meet, but they live in a realm where that can't be seen, you know.
But you mentioned the word hypocrite earlier on, and I often think about that when you're talking about drug abuse there, and you know, I have friends on like couldn't be further on the socioeconomic spectrum. Like some guys who are some of the richest guys in Ireland, some friends who've come up in shockingly terrible, you know, circumstances and still live in abstract poverty. And there's one thing that strikes me is there's almost no connection between money and happiness. But another is it's the snobbery around the different types of drug and how we've categorized different types of drug. And upper class people look down their nose at people that are on heroin on the street and go, scumbag, junkie, he's taking heroin. But at the same time, they'll have no problem taking a line or two of cocaine in the nightclub at the weekend, 100%. Or more so, like more often than the weekend.
And that's it. Drugs was not a problem until it started crossing classes. That's what I started seeing. So I grew up in Jobstown, where drugs was always in my housing estate. Heroin was always there. Now, I didn't grow up in the 80s, but my family did. And when heroin came to areas, working class areas and stuff like that and all, it ravaged them. Because people that are there in bad situations are trying to escape reality as well. They're trying to get away from this stuff, you know. So, but then when drugs start crossing classes or crossing the over to the other side of the city, that's when I start seeing it kind of coming to like the real, we got to have the war on drugs now, you know. We got to go after this and stuff like that. And you're dead right. It is drugs like cocaine and that's not just Ireland. That has been the world over. So, as didn't cocaine start in like Hollywood and then trickle down into the hoods, if you get me, you know?
But you know, such a detachment. Like I remember going to school, a lad I went to school with, rest in peace, but they're nice enough lads, you know. I would have played football with him and been close enough pals with him. But, you know, he was killed in gangland killing, you know, drug dealing, you know, doing stuff he shouldn't have been, not endorsing it, and he was killed. I remember coming home, I was riding the bike in France. My ma picked me up at the airport and she's like, "Did you hear your friends after getting killed? It must have been a case of mistaken identity." And I was thinking, it definitely wasn't a case of mistaken identity. He probably had that coming to him. But then in law school and, you know, seeing people and their casual adoption of cocaine, but with a total detachment on that killing in North Dublin, with a total detachment on the consequences of drugs, where drugs come from, where that supply line comes from. They think it's, you know, made in Marks and Spencer's or delivered to them through, you know, a Deliveroo driver.
That same kind of like shield or block is not just for drugs. It's with everything. You know, it stops people from seeing homelessness. It stops people from seeing the parties that have systematically created homelessness through their policies. And they're able to just disappear, basically. So the drug problem in the world, if you look at places like Portugal, who have they release drugs, so all drugs are legal. Crime went down, because it becomes a human thing as well, where the kind of, when you take away the want or you take away the you can't have kind of situation, it does take away a little bit of the addiction property to it.
It also takes the cool factor when you're a kid. Like, what did you want to do when your ma said to you, you can't play football after dinner? The only thing you wanted to do was play football after dinner.
Yeah, 100%. And what you were saying there, so you mentioned something there, and if you give me a minute or two on this, I'll kind of try and explain what my view of this is. That so you mentioned like someone grew up in really, really nice house things, and then someone grew up in absolute squalor. To me, our bodies are just kind of like a shell or like a vehicle to hold their spirit and hold their soul, if you must, you know. And things like greed and lust and like jealousy and all of them things are not generally bad things. They're sensors. So they're sensors so we can actually touch up close to these problems or these things that our body would want to do, and we get to practice. So we get to get better at not being greedy. We get to get better at not having 10 kids because you can't stop your addiction to probably sleeping with, having multiple sexual relationships, yeah, in a way, and then you've got 10 kids running around. And to me, the reason why it is, so say if you grew up in a working class housing estate or something like that, you will get to meet this stuff very early. So you will get to meet the idea of like fear would be another one. I'm going to have to face this fear. Where sometimes you might be too protected if your life is too comfortable. Now, I'm not saying fear doesn't happen in different ways, but it mightn't happen for a long time until you're older. And you might get to a certain age, so you just run for it for the rest of your life. And you mightn't even know you're running from it. To me, this body and this all we have here, we are humans, we're mere mortals. When we go to the other side or when we die or what we do, people go, you just die and you go in a hole in the ground. You absolutely do not. 100% you do not, right? And this process here is about being able to transcend through that. There's going to be nobody standing at the pearly gates going yes and no. So the message of be good and you go to heaven, be bad and you go to hell, it's kind of like the title on a book, if you get me, okay? Because if you do loads of bad in your life, when you transcend and you go to the other side, you will be looking and you won't be able to get through the badness. You won't be able to get through that things that's facing you. And you will probably spend the rest of your time wherever that space is. If you don't have to deal with that, if you don't have to deal with the badness because you were really good in your life, you will bounce out of the lobby and you will start going into the other realms of where we need to be. This is a process. This is a big exercise, I think. And our body is just a whole, like our spirit, our soul, and the sensors, these are all tests every single day.
You mentioned growing up in Jobstown, and I remember pretty vividly one of my first days in first year in school, and you're in the yard and it's your sort of first time experiencing this. The heart rate's elevating, the palms are getting a bit sweaty, and you're like, I'm going to be in a fight. There's a fight coming. You do experience this sort of sensation, and this, some people might encounter this, until they're, 45 years old on Dawson Street coming out of a nightclub, and they're like, oh my God, this is the first time I've felt this. Yeah. But when you are in working class housing estates, this is something you're confronted with earlier in life. And talk to me about that first experience and how that led you to start fighting.
Every day I would have dealt with that, and in a good way, and sometimes to your friends, sometimes they I think bully is a hard word because bully can happen in so many ways, but sometimes it was just another kid that was a little bit pissed off and you were a little bit smaller than him and he gave you a clue. It wasn't deeper than that. People would be like, well, he must be a bully and have psychological issues. No, we all grew up in a rough place. I was blessed. So when I wrote my book, The Hooligan, I wrote in that my house was a safe haven. I was able to go back to my house. We never suffered any abuse or anything in my house. My mother still is the most incredible woman I've ever met in my life. She doesn't hold any grudges. People have done her terrible things, bad things, and she would send them nothing but prayers.
Mas are great, aren't they?
My man, she's invincible in that way, So, but then other kids I know, maybe people a little bit further around, you won't say close just so people can't recognise people or whatever it is, but they wouldn't have had safe havens to go back to. So when I was out in the street, it was like I was getting thrown into the ring for a little while, and I'd be like, hey, and then I go back to my house and I'd be like, that was mad. And I kind of recover. Where I think some kids, their spirit, or maybe even as young adults, is getting chipped at every single day of their life. And by the time they get to a certain age, they have to consume something or do something to just escape reality. They're trying to escape their body. They're trying to escape the responsibility of these sensors that I'm talking about. Because the minute they get a lot of money, they spend a lot. Or the minute they get, like, say, a good relationship, they need to be untrue or unloyal, and they need to have maybe a girlfriend on the side. All of these things as they're getting older, but because they don't know how to understand that, like, how to just enjoy now.
Well, it's almost like their natural resting state is conflict. So they're trying to, so they've grown up in this constant conflict in their house. So as they journey through life, if they find a partner that's very peaceful, it's almost like, well, I need to chip at this to get back to my state of conflict.
Yeah.
Because that's what I know and that's what I need. It's interesting, though, that you were going out and you were able to get into these scraps, but then you were coming home into the safe haven. Because that's very similar to the life of a fighter, where you're going out, stepping into the limelight, the public eyes, you're scrapping in the octagon, but then you're going away and you're going back to the safe environment, to hone skills, to a very disciplined existence, and then stepping back in again, and it mirrors what you experienced as a kid.
Yeah, like and safe haven. I mean, like, we were broke. We hadn't got we had a lot of money. It was like you couldn't get down and pick whatever yogurt you want out of the fridge. You'd probably be lucky if that was yogurt. That kind of stuff.
But did you know you were broke?
No, I didn't. I can't remember who. I think it's Tupac says it in a song, but he was like it's like we had nothing, but we had everything in a way. And I did. I had as much love as I needed. I had as much like a spiritual guidance that I needed. All of that kind of stuff in my way. Like, and religion wasn't shoved down my throat. Football teams weren't shoved down my throat. All of these things that I think that people kind of like to get aligned to because they're born somewhere, you know. Now, you mentioned Jobstown. So Jobstown is a place that I love, and it's always somewhere that would be close to my heart. It shaped me. It made me who I am. The adversity, I let it in and I let it shape me. But I also spent a lot of time in a place called Lannadown in Andersonstown in Belfast. During a heavy times, so probably 93, 95, 96, you know, coming up to the Good Friday Agreement, where there was a lot of, so I understood a few things of like madness. I'd be going back to Jobstown and there'd be like a fight on the road and I'd be like, and he'd be like, oh, it was mad. I'm like, you think that's mad? Well, sure. Madness, absolute madness I witnessed in Belfast. Like I witnessed like 200-300 people on a field fighting against basically the army in the corner, and they would be shooting plastic bullets into the crowd and like I was only young, you know what I mean? And I seen true discourse in how the media report stuff as well, very young. So I understand this as an adult. I would see somebody, I don't know, maybe getting hurt in a situation. And then on the newspaper, I would see how they had aggravated the police, or they had done something when it was the absolute opposite.
But these anchor points are so important. Then you spoke with John Lally, mutual friend of ours. His dad. I'm not sure how much you know about his dad, but his dad's one of the best bike riders Ireland's ever produced.
Whoop the lad.
The lad. He still rides with us on a Saturday, every Saturday, and he's mid-80s. But me and John spoke about this at length, and it's the idea of doing hard stuff and having these hard anchor points in your life. You're talking about, you know, a rough environment in Jobstown, a rough environment living in Belfast. But when you come along and you have a little bit of adversity in your life, then it's not like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You have an anchor point and go, it's a bad day, but it's not that bad. Like I encourage everyone to have them in cycling. You know, there's a big culture in cycling at the moment, the training indoors. I'm like, get outdoors, train in the weather, train in the snow, train in the rain. Because some of the experiences that I look back on, they form your, you know, racing in Canada. And I remember one race in particular going out there, and I was staying in a hotel near the start line, and I looked down and everyone's wrapped up in scarves, long gloves, you know, ready for proper winter. And I was like, we're bike racing here. And I was like, you know what, them. I'm going down shorts and jersey, no gloves. I'm on the start line. Lads are looking at me going, what is this lad up to? And I'm like, this is a grand day back in Ireland. What are you on about? And it was like immediately like, he's here to race. He's not out here training. He's here to race. And I froze to pieces. Like, got hypothermia, you know, shaking, couldn't use my hands for days after. But I'm out in a race now 2-3 years later, and I'm like, Jesus, this is very cold. You have that anchor point and go, it's cold, but it's not as cold as that day was.
100%. And the thing is, a lot of people have that the opposite way. I think where like sometimes things can happen that are absolutely the end of the world when they're really not. Sometimes like I hear stories all of the time, and I'm honest with people. I'm a coach to a massive community, and I'm the head coach there. I'm the head gorilla. You know what I mean, in a way. So I guess some people saying some stuff to me, and some stuff could be like, shit, that's a serious situation. Like, and try and give them guidance. But then some of it I'd be like, let's take this away, take that away, and they're like, that's bullshit. It's nothing. Yeah. And they're like, do you know what? When you put it like that, you're right. So it's the idea of being able to have them anchor points, and nobody's problems are able to be gauged, I think, by other people as well, because we don't know how it affects people. But some people need to toughen the up, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not saying that, like, I mean, for me and my circle in that way, if you're getting, say, they come to and they see the race and they see the snow, and that's enough to not make them even get on the bike now. That's where you would be going, like, hold on here. You need to get on the bike at least, because that's the start to realise that even that you couldn't do it, you couldn't finish the race. If you don't get on the bike, you'll never even know.
But you know what, when you zoom out and you take that principle of doing hard things, and the more I start thinking about it, it's more of a principle that governs my life. It's everything. It's doing the hard things. Like this evening, you know, long day, we're doing this podcast, and you're going, right, this evening, what am I going to cook? What's the easy thing? What's the hard thing? The easy thing's takeaway. What's the hard thing? It's putting the backpack on. It's walking to the shop, filling it with groceries, coming back, chopping it. What's the easy thing? Driving into the car to work. What's the hard thing? Cycling in. What's the easy thing? Skipping the gym session. The hard thing, doing the gym session. The hard way is always the right way.
do you think there's something in that in society to kind of like, I don't know, like when you see like the introduction, if you go back 10 years, say for iPhones or whatever it is like that, to introduce this kind of like stabilized state of people in a way. Like if we just keep everything handy, everyone more efficient, more smooth, everything, people will just basically be compliant and people will not have that pushback, that hardcore or them anchor points that you're talking about. Imagine what happens in 20 years when it rolls forward. Like someone asked me, I think it was actually the conversation we had here about my young lad was like I would be like, if he walked on a building site Monday to Friday now, I would he'd probably need therapy, you know what I mean? In a way, if it was the same building site that I walked on as a kid, you know, and it was like, he just rolled off with these things. Now, I know as society gets better, we get to highlight stuff and we get to recognise stuff, which means that like that was bad and maybe we were doing it for too long and that needs to stop. We absolutely understand that happens. But then you get people that's kind of like, it's their job. And they're like, right, what can we find now that was basically maybe a little bit kind of controversial in a way, and we need to like outcast it now and make a big campaign about it and stomp it out, and let's make it all safe again. Like if it's too safe, everything's just too safe all of the time, and we concentrate on let's nobody's ever gonna die ever again. Like it's like, are you having a laugh? Like I don't want that life. I want to die someday. I want to go to wherever, what's happening. I'm in the journey now of I'm my fourth kid on the way. I've built a lot from absolute scratch in a way. So as I mean, it's like I was never given like a deposit for my gym. I was never given like things that I have in my life. I made it with my hands, and I feel that I know that's in my body. And my kids, when I have my kids, that's in them. I can see it in them, even in their behaviours. As my kid is Seamus, is 3 years of age now. And he's mad. He wants to play outside. He wants to be in the muck. He wants to skid around. He likes a bit of the YouTube and stuff like that as well. But he gets it in moderation. But that's what he yearns for. He wants to go to the mountains. He wants to do these things. And that's, to me, is like when you do it in your life, it actually does go into your kids.
Yeah, you definitely need to be that example that you want. I talked to, because behind the podcast we have a coaching company and we coach cyclists and we coach them. And a big folks, it used to be when I started out the coaching company, I started it when I was in France and I was trying to be a pro cyclist and I was broke. I went to law school and, going back to when we were talking about, growing up poor and never knew you were poor. I remember being in my ma's a few weeks ago and ordering a takeaway, and she was telling me a story about, she's like, that takeaway, you have to spend 50 quid on sushi. She's like, I remember walking from here to Fairview to take a fiver out of the ATM machine for dinner because it was the only ATM machine in Dublin that would give fivers out. And she's like, I didn't have the money for the bus fare down and I didn't want to waste money on the bus back because it'd be less food. She's like, you're spending 50 quid on sushi. And I'm like, yeah. So it was coming from that. I didn't get law school fees handed to me. There was no like, there's your law school, go and enjoy it. It was like, you want to go to college? Work on the building site in the summer. Save your money, pay your bit for college, get your loan from the credit union. So when I got a contract over in France, law school loans are kicked back in. So I need to start paying back the law school loans. So I was like, right, I have an internet connection. How can I make a few quid at an internet connection? And part of cycling is, as I'm sure UFC, and we get into it in a minute, you train hard, but you rest hard.
Oh, yes.
So I was resting hard. So I was like, feet are up, but I have a laptop and I have an internet connection. Let's figure out how to make money. And that's where the coaching company started from this shitty little bedroom outside a town near close to Bordeaux. Started from there, and it was an entrepreneur of necessity, I tell people at the time. But you learn so much from that, being forced to do that stuff. You learn just, there's something about a back against the wall. Because for me, at the time, it was quit your dream of being a cyclist and go get a job in law, or else figure this out. And it's like, shit, gun is to the head here. I need to figure this out. And the clock is ticking because that trigger's getting pulled soon. And I tell you get some creativity and inspiration from that situation.
And I just don't think a lot of the backs are going to end up against the walls now. And maybe, like, do you ever hear that saying that, weak people create hard times. Yeah. Hard times create tough people. Tough people create good times. And good times create... It goes around in a circle in that kind of way. Like, I don't know what kind of phase we are at that. I got to question myself now. What phase are we at that? Because I would do everything in my power for my kids, all right? But I know, or maybe I have the sense, and I don't know if everybody has this, that they have to get adversity. They have to feel what cold water's like. Like if my kid's like, oh, it's too cold, get me a wetsuit. It's like, no, you got to try it. Get in, you'll be grand. Breathe it out, breathe it out. Oh, I am grand. And then they play in the water or a little bit of its adversity. Now, we don't want them going through the adversity I went through, but they're going to have to understand what that feeling's like, what you were saying there.
Do you worry about that with the kids? What's the saying? Show me a great man who's the son of a great man.
Yes, and this is it, because this is what I was going to touch on now, right? So we are in a situation in this country where, like, and this pops straight away from what we're talking about, we're a housing crisis, okay? So in the famine, the land grab happened, and the land basically was rented to the citizens. I won't even say Irish citizens, citizens that called this place home, basically, all right? So we're in a situation now where a large percent of this country owns, or a small percent of this country owns a large percent of the property in this country, basically. So, say for an example, give me 2 minutes on this as well, so I don't butcher it. So we have a program in Ireland called the HAP program, right? So which is the Housing Assistance Payment program, which most people would need now these days because they can't rent and they can't buy, okay? So if you're earning under €36,000, you can apply for it to be on a social housing list, which will take 12 years in this country, right? My girlfriend's from Liverpool, and I communicate with people over there how long it actually takes over there, okay? It takes 12 years to be housed. So you will be waiting 12 years. So in that place, they will give you the housing assistance, so HAP, all right? HAP can be up to 1,900 quid, okay, a month. And it's kind of like, yeah, well, this is great. We're housing people and we're helping people to be housed. Then we need to go back to what I just said. A small minority in this country owns a large amount of the property, okay? So when they're waiting to be housed into a council house for 12 years, the taxpayers fund that a public person will be paying this to a private landlord. So say if some Fianna Fáil or Fianna Gael or Sinn Féin TD or whatever it is, they own 4 properties and they have 4 people in there at a HAP, paying HAP. In 12 years, they will own them 4 properties outright and they could still rent them basically, okay? But then they die because we all have to die. And then they pass them on to their kids and their kids become landlords basically to people who are working 9 to 5, who are the children of people who have worked 9 to 5. So we are going into a direction where this is only going to get worse, and there's a reason why it's not getting solved. The homelessness, when someone's lying in a doorway or someone's dying on the street and it's on the newspaper and stuff like that and all, that's probably, forgive me for saying this and I don't mean it this way, but it's one of the biggest advertisements to why pay our mortgage because we're rootless and we will take your house off you and we will put you on the street. Oh, you want accommodation? We have a hostel down here for you, but you have to be out in the morning. And then when you look at how much money's going into this, right, then you realise this is a business. So they will be renting beds. If you go onto the DHRA and I get some of the reports and stuff like that from it because I'm a counsellor, I get to see this stuff. I know what's going on. They could fix this tomorrow and we would have no housing problems. But not only that, if we don't have housing problems, guess what goes down? The rent.
It's really difficult. But this is why stories like yours capture the public imagination so well, because it's really hard to break out of the class structure. It is really hard to go from working class to middle class or middle class to upper class because it's generational wealth you're building. And, you talk about the homeless thing and it's, I'm sure with these councillors and, I know you're in the council and politicians, they're getting reports and it's numbers. And I fall into this with the podcast at times as well, where you're looking at stats and you're looking at download numbers. But behind every download number, behind every statistic of someone who's homeless, it's a person, it's a story. Mm-hmm. There's a girl down that I'm living above a shop here where we're recording at the moment. There's a girl that begs outside the shop and I'd often come in from training and there's a little wall there and I'd sit with her and just shoot the crack and, how are you getting on today? And I'd be yapping away with her and she's living in a tent and she's living with a tent because, she's a real good looking girl for a homeless girl. She's a good looking girl for any girl, but she happens to be homeless and she's real cool, tattoos, funky, really looks after herself, what she eats, even though she's homeless. She's had a bad situation that's put her homeless, but she's terrified to go into the hostels because she's a good looking girl. She's like, I keep getting sexually assaulted.
And let me tell you, there's men that are 6 foot tall, muscles, like scary men in a way, like what your vision would be. And they won't go into the hostels. I see this all the time. They say that there's such thing as dry hostels and stuff like that. And maybe there is somewhere, but I've never found them. I once rang for a guy on a Sunday I think it was at 10 o'clock at night, and I think it's 10:30 that the beds come on. There was 7 beds in the whole city. 7 beds, right? In the whole city for people who were on the streets. That's the emergency accommodation, okay? Another night, I rang, I won't say which charity it was, but people need to be very careful with all of these charities as well. And as I said, like, I am here to be a voice. And if people want to chop me down and attack me, I said about the Denzel Washington thing just before this. I said the devil doesn't come for people who do his work. Basically, he leaves them alone. The devil comes for those who are fighting against the tide and splashing against it. And I don't care. I will put my hands up and I will fight. They can say what they want about me. They can try and make me out. You just got to come and meet me, and you'll know exactly who I am. You know, it's like, oh my God, he's actually all right, you know. And that's, I don't do that this is always who I was. Before the UFC, after the UFC. But I rang, and there was 2 lads in one of the charities. People need to be careful of the charities, because every time I see something, it's like, oh, let's give this money to the PA the house. Oh, let's give this money to the Simon community. Oh, let's give this money to Peter McVerry. And I'm kind of like, wait, hold on. These are nearly like big businesses now.
Let's jump in and talk about UFC, because that must have been just such an exciting ride. Like, I think about, I know you're not a huge cycling fan, but there was a period in cycling in the early 90s when this group of lads came from the States. You'll know some of the names because they're some of the most iconic in any sport ever. It was like Lance Armstrong came over from parking all the stuff around dope, and they came over and they cut through a forest. They were these American kids cracking into this European tradition. When I think about UFC, I think about you lads fighting that same fight. UFC was unknown. The brand was unknown. I remember watching it late night TV. You used to be up late to watch UFC with a pirate satellite dish out the back. My cousin used to install satellite dishes with a pirate satellite dish. I think he used to be on Bravo at about 2 a.m. Yeah. You'd get it. And then you lads came along and you made it mainstream. And I was living in the States at the time. I was still trying to make a career as a cyclist. And I remember the first time I ever seen an Irish lad on a billboard. I was in Boston for a bike race, and I seen McGregor on a billboard. I was like, what? He's from Dublin and he's on a billboard in Boston. What's going on here? How exciting was that to be a part of that journey? Man,
I looked out the window of Boston at the same hotel you're talking about, and I seen Conor on a bin, and I was blown away. And the bus as well. Like, what's going on here? Like, this is, special group of people came together there. That's what that was. An incredible group of people. Just wanted it, just was willing to pay the process, was willing to pay the piper, is what I say, you know what I mean, and willing to do whatever it took. And when I first started, there was no division for me. So basically, there was no 125 pound division, no flyweight division. It was either WEC. So the UFC wasn't even kind of like, hold on, because there's no divisions. And not only that, but my training partner, Ashlyn Daly, it was a female fighter as well. There was no females fighting in the UFC. But not only that, Dana Whitehead came out and said there will never be any females fighting in the UFC. So if we were against the odds, we were against the odds, because the place didn't exist yet. So when we were putting it together, we were training. I remember, so Ash is Ireland's first world champion in mixed martial arts, because Ash was like kind of leading the way at the start, and like on television, and I think she's done the thing on Channel 4 and all. And I remember being like, this is madness. Like, so I would have been only young. I would have been about 19 years of age when I started at the gym, 18. The time, had a baby on the way, and I just wanted to change my life. So, but when the UFC thing happened, I remember walking into the gym. It wasn't a big fancy gym at this time. It was still a little small gym, still a kind of thing. And Conor had signed for the UFC. Now, 5 years before this, someone named Tom Egan had fought in the UFC. He had from our gym, didn't go really well for him. Nobody really knew about the UFC still after it. But we were all in that stadium that night. We were all standing there watching Tom fight. Didn't go well for Tom. And then 5 years later, all of us made that walk. So I was the second Irish man to make a walk from the dressing room after Tom Egan.
But it was even the style that you brought to the whole thing. I remember a press conference.
In Dublin.
I remember the press conference, and it was McGregor was sitting to your left side. You were wearing the 3-piece suit. The leanest man I've ever seen, because I was a cyclist and we were all about cutting weight. I was like, holy shit, how lean is this lad, the hooligan? And I think McGregor said something along the lines of, how good does the hooligan look in the 3-piece suit? And I was like, these lads aren't playing around. Like,
cannot change the game.
It was a branding masterclass.
Conor was a general, you know what I mean, in that way. Because in the first one, in the Dublin thing, I think even Dublin, I wore it. I think it was like, I ran around looking for one of my T-shirts from the club. So one of the SPG T-shirts, because I wanted to represent that on the stage of the thing. Conor was like, I'm going to have a dicky bow, I'm going to have my shirt. He had it ready to go, you know what I mean? Where I would have probably still been struggling a lot with, like, I need to get this guy out here. And after that, I need to fight this guy, I need to win. Where, like, I think Conor was a lot more confident at that time than maybe I'm a little bit more confident now. I'm a little bit more mature. I think maybe he maybe had that a little bit early, and that helped us all. So to me, I always call him the general. So he was the general at that time, and he was the one who was kind of like, he was fighting the card. Now, we were all doing our own work. We all did our own work. This way, there's no one can fight the fight for you, you know. But when the Dublin card came up, I think that's when the world really knew, you know. Well, when he knocked out Diego. Not Diego Bandera, it was first guy. I was at the Ultimate Fighter. So I was in Vegas and I was trying to get on the Ultimate Fighter, which is like Big Brother, which you fight each other.
I remember watching it,
yeah. You know what I mean? And I was there and I was telling Dana about like one of my friends that arrived last week, and he was like, oh shit, like you were that Irish kid. Like, and I'm like, yeah, am I not gonna miss? There's 10 of us gonna walk in that door. And I told the Tommy Tiernan story, you know, where like you come with sleeping bags and phone numbers saying, and that's what I said to him, like, and he was laughing. This was the interview process, which was hard. That didn't go well for me. I got this horrible wrestler, kind of like a Khabib style, but doesn't hit you either. Like, so horrible style. Lost 2 rounds there. Came back to Dublin, slipped a disc, had to get surgery, all of this stuff. It was just so much like adversity. But as I said, all of that adversity is part of your spirit ground. I got the phone call 5 weeks before UFC Dublin to sign for the UFC. So 5 weeks before.
And you headlined UFC Dublin, didn't you?
The second one I headlined, yeah. So I opened the show in the first one, so I was the Berserker, the Norseman covered in animal fat and hallucinogenics running down the hill. That's what Berserker was back in Celtic times. So I opened the show. I ran down and I was the one who like created the madness and put it in, you know. And that was it. I was the hooligan. He is real. He was in there. He's not there anymore, but he used to be there.
When people look at UFC now, and UFC is $1 billion global brand now. That's not what it was when you lads arrived. No. It was this rinkety-dink, almost car park fight club cult brand. And if people said they were into it, you kind of looked at them going, wow, like, that's a weird thing to be into. Does McGregor get enough credit for, because his extracurricular activities, he's in the newspapers every week for stupid shit, and does that take away from how big of an influence he was and you lads were as a collective at launching UFC to that brand?
No, he doesn't, and he deserves more. As I said to you, sometimes the devil only comes, he doesn't come for his own, you know. So with the newspaper stuff and all, what Conor to me is maybe we should focus a lot more on what our governments are doing and the corruption that's going on in these places and be more open about this stuff. And like, Conor's a sports star. If Conor wears a tracksuit, they'll tell you the price of it tomorrow in the newspaper. And I'm like, I don't think Conor really cares about that. And I don't think that, this is my opinion, that should not be the news. The news should be about the serious stuff that's going on, you know. Now, but Conor is an absolute iconic Irish sportsman. And that's the way people, whether you want to see it or not, it's just, he is the one who broke that. He changed the price of that company. And Dana knows that. And they all know that, you know. Now, how did I come into it? How did we come into it? I think maybe at the same time, all of the classes were represented, if you must. Okay, so Carl Pendred was there, Aisling Daly was there, I was there, Artem was there, Conor was there.
Artem's a beast.
Another animal, yeah. And you had people on the an animal, an absolute animal, and a fighter at heart, you know. But what I mean is that, like, we struck a few. Neil Searley was there. We struck a few. All of the classes nearly, or all of these communities at the same time. So what happens is each player, someone already told me just the other day, they were like, when I first seen Conor, I was like, that's brilliant. Like, the kids in Crumlin have this icon and all. I was like, wouldn't it be great if Tala had somebody like that?
Yeah.
He said, it was only the next day after that. I was like, oh my God. Now, he's one of my students now. But he was like, I found you. And he was like, and then I'd seen your message, and it was all about like about what you are, community, and all of this kind of growth in your community and all. And he was like, and this is why I'm here now. you know?
But don't we hold athletes up to be too much? Like you're talking about, we need to focus on news being news and sport being sport. Like I heard some interview, I'm not sure how long ago it was, from McGregor, and they were asking him some question. He's like, I think you're confused on what I do. He's like, I get into a cage and I smash people's faces open for money.
Yeah.
That's what fighters do. That's what athletes do. They race bikes, they run as fast as they can, but we want to pull them into, Tyson Fury last day before his title fight, he's getting asked about Daniel Kinahan connections. It's like, it's not what he does. Tyson Fury, maybe he'll give you a bit of a sing-song at the end of a fight, but he's a fighter. Let fighters fight.
As we said, the media don't want that. They don't really want to be talking about that. That doesn't sell the papers. They want to be printing stuff on the front of the paper about connecting some athletes to something or whatever it is, and that's it. We need better. We just need to expect. It's our own fault as well, because we need to expect more from our media. I don't know. We're not picking up a paper that's talking shite about something on the front of it. Like, I want to see what's going on. I want the truth. Like, I check the dates twice on the newspaper now because I don't believe it that much.
How dialed were you on? When I look at cycling and I talk to other high performance athletes, I'm always amazed at how they're high performance in just tag, and they're not doing the basic stuff that cyclists have been doing for, since Armstrong changed the game in the early 90s. The attention to detail in cycling, like I was half joking about weighing the oatmeal earlier on, but that is the life of a cyclist. It's, constant. I remember my previous girlfriend starting going out with her, and she moved in. She's like, what's going on here? And I was like, I have an altitude tent like chained around the bed for sleeping, and I'm taking, pulse oximeter readings every night going to bed. Cyclists are just, it feels like they're moving the needle all the time. How dialed is UFC and that type of stuff?
Well, the building the engine thing comes from cyclists for MMA, so it's not too far away, to be honest, because it takes a lot of the pressure off our back and our legs and our knees and stuff like that. So a lot of my stuff would have been done in the pool. And then you probably know Julian Dalby.
Iconic cyclists.
And you know Paul Doyle. Yeah, so Paul, I teach Paul's son, Ryan, and stuff like that. So I've done a little bit with them. And we did a little bit on Iceland as well about building the engine. So in 1 minute intervals, and like the green, the red, and the yellow, or the orange zone. So what you were saying there, so checking your heart rate in the morning to see where your recovery heart rate is. If your heart rate is up, you've got to take the day off, you've got to sleep, and then because recovery is a massive part of it.
And are they still doing that as, like, how much are they moving the dial? How much are you connected to that elite level now in UFC?
Well, the idea is what I do now. So I'm into athlete development. That's what I'm in. I'm not into like, I was going to say I'm not into people winning. I am into people winning, but I'm into people seeing. I'm into watching people do the process and then seeing it coming out and going, right, that's it, and then monitoring, rechecking it, and going again. So basically, it takes about 5 or 6 years, I think, to get somebody as a professional athlete in MMA. But some people, if you wire down the time that they put in, could be only 4 years. They're in the gym 6 years, but the work has only been done.
It's interesting. I had a consultation with a buddy of mine, and he's a podcaster. He's one of the top podcasters in the business genre when I was launching the podcast. And he was saying to me, look, if you publish once a week with your podcast, this is the sort of growth you can expect. And I was like, well, how do I shortcut that? And he's like, publish 5 days a week. There's 5 years of growth. In the same time, someone else is publishing once a week is getting. And I was like, that just spoke to me as a cyclist, because I don't feel like I was ever the most talented in anything. Like, all through school, I was never very talented. But when it came time to crunch for exams, I could turn into a Jedi Knight for 2-3 weeks where I'd hardly sleep. No one would see me. And I'd know books inside out. Like, it was preparation. And that's what got me through school. That's what got me through university. That's what got me through law school. That's what gave me some limited success in cycling to a point. I feel like I got the very, very most out of it. So that's why when I started hitting the podcast, and I was like, how do I turn this dial up?
Yeah.
And athletes can do that, especially when they've people like you in their corner to shortcut stuff and say, here, look, I went down that road for 2 years and it's a waste of time. Turn left at the end of there, because right's a dead end.
Mate, you want to see the people I talk to now, and I say it, and I might be smashing my head off that wall there. Like, I say it to them, and they look at me like, yeah, but you're lying. And I'm like, why would I lie to you? Like, I just don't. And I don't have time for people. Like, I give so much of myself to people, right? But then it gets to a stage where I'm like, I'm just not doing it anymore. They go, you don't show me attention anymore. It's like, maybe that's for a reason. Maybe because I have to chase you. Maybe because you're not turning up and you're expecting the results and you're representing my name now in a way, like as in like I trained you, but you're going out and doing something else.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like I don't know, you training a cyclist and then he turns up on a scooter, and it's like, but you're like, we didn't train on a scooter. Do you know what I mean? In a way, they can do the wrong things. Now, then again, on the opposite side of that, I have some incredible athletes. So I have some incredible athletes that are so good. They're willing to pay the process. They don't see the dark times. They don't see when you're going to be off injured or you have to get a surgery and you have to recover, or you have to keep your weight down. Where people think like they don't see that, so it doesn't exist. So if someone comes to me and I go to somebody and say, right, I want to climb Everest. They'll go, oh, that's going to take a lot of training, even if they don't know. But fighting's not like that for some reason. Everyone has this entitlement to like, oh yeah, we can bang, bro, yeah? Yeah, we can fight. Had 10 street fights, yeah? You're not, no way, but it's like if someone comes to me and says they want to fight in the UFC, they basically came to me and said, I want to perform in the Tour de France. And now we get people, right now, and I won't get in trouble for saying this because I don't get in trouble anymore because I don't even listen to trouble, you know what I mean? But we had an Irish guy fighting in the UFC last week. I don't know if you know, but he should not be in the UFC, and someone else needs to say it. I always seem to be the person to say it, but as I said, I don't do jealousy. I don't do all this. I do truth. So I'm gonna say it, and people are like, don't say it. And my girlfriend's always like, don't say it. And I'm like, I'm gonna say it. Shouldn't have been there. Got disqualified in the first round. Had the biggest opportunity in his life ever. We have other athletes in this country then where they have paid the process over and over and over again. And I would get frustrated seeing somebody jump in the queue and taking that from them. And people go, yeah, well, you should be happy for everybody that's in there. Like, imagine somebody cycling the Tour de France where you're like, he's shy. And you're like, yeah, well, you better get behind him because he's Irish.
But is there if you zoom out and you look at it, is the decision to put someone into the UFC, is it multifaceted? Is it, you talk about it's not straight up who's the baddest man in the world anymore. No. There's a branding element to it. There's he's bringing a new audience to it. There's probably he has a big social following element to it. You have many different elements to it now.
Yeah, but that the thing is, I can't understand it, and I don't think another people, well, whatever. And I wish the best to people. Even when that happens, I wish the best to them. But the other night exactly happened what I was fearing, but it's like we built a big brand in the UFC as in the Irish being there, the fighting Irish. And if we start representing it with people who are probably not up to scratch, I just don't know. Like, you know what I mean? We built a big thing, bringing the UFC back to Dublin and all. Conor did that. I happened to be part of that where I got to go out and fight and do that thing. And as I said, people bring criticism now, where it's constructive criticism from somebody who is qualified enough.
Well, you've earned the right to have an opinion on
it.
Like, and I listen to this in cycling all the time, and people are having an opinion. I'm like, shut up. Like, you don't get to have that opinion. It used to frustrate me with soccer because I grew up my life, I had two lives, the soccer life and the cycling life, and up until I was 17, like, all I done was on the streets playing football all day long. It's never bothered with school because I just thought it was pointless. I'm going to be a pro footballer.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to school. My man thinks there's books in this bag, there's nets and there's a ball in this bag. I'm hitting free kicks in the park till my feet bleed. But I think sometimes, I don't know where I was going with that, but the question I meant to ask you on this before I got segued on that random journey was, we spoke about John Lally. John Lally's young lad, Max.
Yes.
How goes Max?
Incredible. Max is one of these kids as well that has paid the process over and over and over again. He's incredible. I remember doing a seminar, I think, years ago, and Max was there, like, as a kid, rolling. He was always interested in this, and I think with his father's guidance and stuff like that and all, because his dad has got like a sport background. Because let me tell you one thing, and you know this as well. I'm not telling you, I'm telling whoever's listening and stuff like that. People think like that someone's going to walk past a park and see someone playing football and going, oh my God, look how good that kid is. I'm going to ring my mate that's a scout and now he's going to play for you. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't not. It's so much more political than that, like there could be someone in the way that goes like I hate him or I hate his coach. And they can subconsciously try and get in the way, you know what I mean? Where I think John is going to be a great guide for Max. And if you think of the great fighters, think of them. The Welsh guy, what's his name? Calzaghe, with his dad. Khabib, where is that? Tyson Fury, where is that? Gunny Nelson, where is that? These people that are really have somebody that actually gives...
You can even throw Tyson in there as well with Custamato.
Yeah, Custamato, you know. So I think when you have got a real guide with you that actually is emotionally invested, but not emotionally invested where they're trying to get their own success, because some coaches can precariously live through their athletes to get their own success because they probably never got it themselves. You know what I mean, in a way? They never got satisfied in what they did in their career. So they flog some young lad forever, you know what I mean? Until he gets it, and then they hold up the trophy or something, you know. So
there's a Buddhist saying that some people come into your life for a reason, others come into your life for a season, others come into your life for a lifetime.
Oh, that's a great saying.
You've 3 different types of interactions you have with people. Do you look back, when I was listening to you and reading the extract from your book, which is brilliant, by the way, I was reading an extract from your book and you're talking about your old coach, John Kavanagh.
Yeah.
I think about that saying, and I think about someone that came into your life for a season, and that season now was maybe past, or have you rekindled that friendship?
I don't talk to John. We don't talk at all, unfortunately. You know what I mean? It's just one of them things. Listen, I am massively grateful for everything I have got in my life and every lesson I've been taught by people. I hold no bitterness or badness for anybody. Do you know why? Because that would be eating me, you know. So we just don't have a relationship.
You say it, unfortunately. Is there a regret there?
Well, I think that anybody who would be like would have get forward for somebody, or who would have trained under somebody, or been mentored by somebody, would probably always have that connection. Like, where I just don't think when I retired, I maybe just have I just stopped. You know what I mean? And it was kind of like a process where, like, we were either doing something together, and that was the only reason we had a conversation. There was never any kind of like conversation outside that, you know, like
was it just an entirely professional relationship?
Yeah, you could kind of say that, you know. And then there was times where it's like, I think maybe probably didn't see how big some of the decisions he was making regarding, you know, on my side, what my effect would have been from decisions that were being made, you know. So where sometimes you can be flying through life, it's so busy, and you can be like, what, you know, but you don't understand that person standing there going, this is everything to me. So I need you to make a little think about this process, or think about this situation, because this is everything, all of it. And it's kind of like, if someone's just rushing too fast, sometimes you just have to kind of like, I don't know, cut them ties, and as I said, don't hold them emotionally, because you can't.
Do you think with a more experienced head now, with the life experience you've gained now, if you transplanted that back to then, would the dynamic of your relationship been different? Would you have taken control of different matters that you maybe just handed off to him?
You can't change people. That's a thing as well. You can change people. So just because sometimes you know something or you think it, you can't change people. So I don't know if John is that person. That's being straight with you, you know. I don't know if, and I think maybe because he does so much that he has to be a little bit kind of like straightforward, you know, and like there's no time to stop and be like, oh, hold on here. And I don't know, you know, just I didn't have that relationship, I feel, as much, you know, and maybe at the time I did, but after I didn't think, you know.
You know, it's a really difficult part of every sport is the transition of finishing up your career. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't do enough for athlete welfare. We celebrate these massive successes of Olympic athletes, professional UFC fighters, cyclists, footballers. I had Nicholas Roach on the podcast a few times. You know, the son of Stephen Roach, massive pressure his whole career. Just finished up a brilliant career last year, and it's like, boom, lights are off on Celebrity Dancing with the Stars. And it's like, no one wants to talk about, well, how are you getting on, Nico? How are you doing? Are you okay? Can we check in with you and see how you are? That's like, did you have anything you could draw on? You know, you had a good family and stuff, but was there any professional support you could draw on to say, okay, you're Paddy Houlihan, the UFC fighter, but now you're not Paddy Houlihan, the UFC fighter. Let's work on who you are.
Oh no, I was from that time I retired, I was like a washing machine falling down the stairs. It was everywhere and all over the place and random. Nobody knew. Like, it was one of them situations. I'll just be straight. I'm not martyr or anything like that. I don't have family that I can really go and have a conversation or talk to. And I didn't really ever talk to anybody. I'm pretty good at being able to not bury stuff and stuff like that, but like, I walk in the woods, I swim in the sea. I understand, as I said at the start, now I understand more that This is just a vessel, you know what I mean, in a way. And all of these things, I pray for some of these adversities at times, because it's like, don't give me the easy life. Give me the strength to endure the hard one, you know, because I know that my spirit is being shaped and molded in this process of life or whatever it is. And everything else outside that is kind of bullshit, you know? And everyone else is on that vessel as well, on their own vessel.
So did you have any work to do to understand who you are when you look in the mirror, when you thought, well, I'm not a fighter anymore? What am I? Who am I?
I was always a coach. I've always coached. When I was 19, I'd finished off coaching studies in Canada and stuff like that, and all. Always interested in athlete development, as I was saying there, and that's what I am obsessed with now. So I'm about 5 years into building my own team now, with some incredible athletes there, you know. So I've got my first person who's turned professional.
Amazing.
Shauna Bannon, she just won a title. She fights for the next title, which is the way up. And I couldn't ask her somebody else as an athlete who was, like, she's incredible as an athlete. She's one of these people that's like, this is what you need to do. And she does that, and she trusts you, you know. And then we've got athletes in under her and just some incredible athletes on my team now that I'm like, I'm very blessed to be around. And not only my team, as in like the people who fight from the gym or something like that, but my coaching squad and, you know, my facility. We've got, like, I'm blessed, but I built this with people who are like angels, you know what I mean? So people who were really good people in my life, and they will be there forever, you know. And
do you have any frustrations? I get this coaching, and I have to, you know, even I'll talk to Sarah at times about it and my frustration when I'm coaching an athlete, and I never had some of these shortcomings that now they have. And one of the big ones is just like doing your training sessions. Like, no one ever had to push me out the door to do a training session. It was just automatic. It was like breathing. It's like, what am I doing today? Like, I have a headache, it's raining, I'm sick. It's like, you have good days and you have bad days at work. I just thought, it's out the door, do your training session. Just, it's on paper, execute, do it. There was never like an excuse, I couldn't do my session today because, boom. Like, there was no fill in the blank. It was sessions got done regardless, you know. Me granny could die, the session would get done before the funeral that morning. And, you know, the worst shit has happened to me in my life. I don't miss my training sessions. And now I work with athletes, and it's like, I came home from work and I was a little bit tired. I didn't get my session in. And I have to nearly stop myself driving over to their house and going.
That's what that person I mentioned, Shauna, would be like. She would, anything could happen. Anything. She would finish that session. There's another two guys, Sam and Dano. So I call them the dangerous duo. So they're jiu-jitsu guys. I say that in a way because they're more jiu-jitsu athletes. They don't really do MMA. But they've been with me since their teens. Listen to this story. So there is people like yourself and still there, right? I comes into the gym and they're over lifting weights with their bags on and their jackets on and dressed ready to go home. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, we had a class to teach, so we just came down to finish off the last set. And I went back into the kitchen and I was like, I fucking love you. They're still there. They still exist.
There's a mate of mine, I still ride with him. I was only riding with him last week, and I was riding with a new group of lads and him. And he loved telling the story when we stopped for a coffee at the midway point. We were out and I was back from France and I was getting ready for the national championships. And I was doing a 20-minute interval. And I was doing it up around the back of the airport. And we were going around a roundabout with about 5 minutes left in this 20-minute effort. And it was 20 minutes, you know, close enough to full gas. So with 5 minutes left in the effort, going around the roundabout, he slid out, lost his back wheel, went down and broke his collarbone. And I looked at him, I was like, I'll be back for you in 5 minutes, Pat. So I finished the interval, I went back for him and he was gone to the hospital. Someone had picked him up off the side of the road. And I didn't even think anything about it. I was like, right, I have one more interval to do. I'll get that done. Then I'll go home and figure out what happened to him. Where did he go to?
That's the zone. Like I'm just trying to say to people, like, you need to be like, see fighting these days. And the reason why I even mentioned the UFC and kind of anybody in the generation that's there now is because I'm trying to, like, if I was going to climb Everest or if I was going to do something like that, I'd want someone to tell me what it was going to be like. I wouldn't want them to give me like, you're going to be grand and a slap on the back. It's not like that. Like, mixed martial arts is one of the most hardest sports in the world, I think. You know what I mean? In a way, you've got everything going on. You've got like knees, elbows, you've got like someone's hitting you, you've got to take them down, you've got jiu-jitsu, you've got it all mixing in, and it's very hard to stay calm and relaxed and all of that. You be calm in the chaos. But then some people, it's like turbulence. They can do 2 minutes and go for it, and then they turn into a human again. And then it's like, oh my God. But yeah, you got to be able to ride the wave. Like say if you come out of the blocks, but you go as fast as you can. Go, go, go. You're like, I'm winning the race and winning the race and winning the race. But you're not really, because you know the guys, it's about pacing themselves. Yeah. They're gonna catch it. You're going to be screwed. You're going to blow your load. Is that what they say?
Can you put that feeling into context for someone who, you know, like me, I'll probably never step into an octagon, or a listener who's never going to step into an octagon. What's that like when you're a full house in the Tree Arena, you're headlining the fight, the announcement's done, the cage closes, and it's just you in the ring and another lad who wants to rip your head off?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's probably the most alive you'll ever feel. It's an absolute incredible feeling, and it's like...
Is it scary?
Yeah, scary. Yeah, it's scary. It's all of them, all mixed together. Like I had to say, like, I remember John saying to me, like, this is the last day of the rest of your life, basically. And I was like, what? And we walked out for Dublin, and he was dead right. I couldn't walk out of the stadium after that. You know what I mean? It was great advice. When I got to say the idea of walking into a cage, I was doing it in the basketball arena, which was down the road from my house. That was a lot more to risk, because at that age, you weren't getting paid money or much money around for it, and you were putting yourself on basically show in front of your whole housing estate. So that was a lot more vulnerable. But the time I got to the UFC, like especially the night I did fight, my first fight in the UFC, you could have put Godzilla in there and I would have killed him. I swear, like that day, when I look at that picture of myself walking out, that's not me. That is not me. I don't recognise that man. I had like left my body. I had just gave it over. I remember feeling my grandfather on my shoulder, you know what I mean? And I know that sounds mad and spiritual, but the more when you get younger, you're like, you don't even want to admit that to yourself. But I was guided at times in there, and I went in there, be a good guy, you know what I mean? At that day, probably got the hardest draw, and probably about from Conor with Diego Bandel out of all of us. Was a bit of a hard draw. The guy I got, Division 2 wrestler that won 3 All-American wrestling titles and had won 5 of his last 6 fights and stuff like that. I was coming back from double back surgery.
So he's a messy guy to fight.
And I'd been out for a year and a half, like, because of my back surgeries. I had back surgery on the 13th of December, and then I fought in July. So I was like, today I could die and I wouldn't care. You know what I mean? That's... Maybe I'm too invested.
No, I think it's the nature of an athlete. I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to my first Ross, which is the Tour of Ireland. And I remember the first time being in the split with all the pros, and I was still in college, came over the top of the Category 1 climb at Healy Pass, came over the top, I'd say there was 25 of us left in the group, and I was like, oh, amazing. Then I thought, shit, now I have to go down Healy Pass with these lads. And I'm only starting bike racing. These lads are all experienced. It's a wet day. And I remember the first corner and thinking to myself, do you know what? If I die, I die. I'll go out happy here. It's a good story. And it was just full commitment.
People won't understand that.
I was like, oh my God, how was it? It's like looking at someone else. When I was writing this story out the other day in a diary, and it's like writing a story about someone else. I don't recognise myself in that. It's like a drone following me down this descent. And
that all the way back to the start of the conversation that we had, like, jealousy, envy, all of these things, your body will do things and your mind's going to have to will it. And it goes all the way back to even further in the conversation where body and mind is everything. So if your body's massively out of shape and unfit, your mind will be in the same place. You'll very rarely find a really, really healthy mind in an unhealthy body. That's what I think. Where the same way you won't find a lot of wisdom and youth in the same place. It's like a lot of things don't belong where you've got to spend one to get the other. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So if you've got a bad body, a bad health, and you get better in that health, you work on it, you'll get a better mind. If you've got a bad mind and you start working on your mind, you'll start helping a better body. So where I think people get to a stage where like spirits are growing in this body, you're hitting that corner there and your spirit's going, whatever. And even if you did die there, you probably end up in a place where you don't have no regrets. You don't have the fear of like, I slow it down and I let them beat me. You let the voice kick in, and then you know what you have for the rest of your life. When you go to that place that I was talking about, that's what you have to face. That's what you have to answer to. No one else matters.
And I had Ian McCall on the podcast who fought in the UFC as well.
Yeah. Ian McCall was in my division.
Was he? Yeah. Really interesting. Uncle Creepy, yeah. He was talking about now he's, I'm not sure how much you follow him anymore. He's a psychedelic integration coach. So he uses psilocybin with his fighters.
I've read a book on this.
And it's very, very interesting. And we haven't really seen it too much. Depending on where you're listening to the podcast, it may or may not be legal. But in some sports, you can take this. It's largely undetectable from what he's telling me in a lot of sports. But it's not on the WADA banned list. I think, I'm not sure, I will double check that before anyone goes out and starts taking it. This is not advice.
Ring in.
But how tight is the doping controls in UFC, or how much? Because I know cycling obviously post the US postal Lance Armstrong, it's non-negotiable. It's they're very, very heavily tested. I'm just off whereabouts only a few months.
Brilliant. Jeff Slavinsky, is that his name?
That was his name, yeah.
That's the guy who got him, yeah. The reason why I know that is because I done like a seminar with him basically at the UFC, telling us all about Lance and how they did it and how they did. Like, to me, I know the sound. There's nothing more disgusting than people doing PEDs, and that's just the way especially in my sport. If you want to hit a ball faster and you want to inject something into your body to do it or something like that, go ahead. You want to punch somebody in the face and you want to take an injection to do it, I have a serious problem with that. I think somebody should be brought for charges for maybe, you know what I mean?
But the line's not black and white, is it? It's grey, because it's like, what about then you're taking tramadol, which isn't on the USADA banned list, but it's undoubtedly performance enhancing. I've seen study after study on how performance enhancing it is.
If you could get into a cage and fight on tramadol, I'd bleed paid to see that, because I took a tramadol when I took my back surgery, and I never took one ever again. Because I just couldn't get myself together. If anybody, and I understand as well, but and now obviously we're talking about so there's someone the EPO, you know what I mean? What's his name? TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw had won a title. He beat somebody that now is on a 4-fight losing streak, I think. But he tested positive for EPO when he did it. So did he take away someone else's chin on the performance enhancing drugs with EPO, and now that's it, it's over? It shouldn't be like that. He's back fighting.
Yeah.
I have a blood disorder, alright? I can't fight, and I said this in my retirement thing, I can't fight in the UFC because I would harm myself. Some of these people take EPO, go and punch somebody else in the face and get a 2 years ban, and then get put back into the UFC.
And is it happening? How prevalent is it in there now?
Oh, the UFC's drug thing is incredible. Absolutely incredible. 24/7 it is. You're on an app, basically look at yourself. They can knock, you have to let yourself know where people are. So if you're going on holidays,
so it's full whereabouts stuff.
Full whereabouts, 24/7. That's why John Jones hid under the cage apparently. Did you ever hear that story? He hid under the cage apparently when they came for him. Supposedly, now this is, you can read the story online, ain't grassing on nobody, but supposedly he had a piss under the cage, and they went in and took it. They took a sample from it.
Jeez.
And they were able to find out. He hid under there for 8 hours or something.
Paddy, conscious of time, what's the future hold for you now?
I am just, the last little while I am just flying, and the amount of planning I've done with stuff like that. So in the last 5 years since I retired, I've been elected in my area, I've wrote a book, I've had 3 kids, I'm like...
Paddy's the most fertile man in Ireland. Yeah. We've been talking about this.
Don't be around me when I'm sneezing. And so I would love to keep on the idea of to keep my finger on the pulse of this politics thing, right? Because I do think that there's a lot of people who wish I would go away. I do think there's probably more moves in the way to, maybe it's a conspiracy to kind of make me go away. You know what I mean? In that way, but the most inspiring thing that's happened the last little while is looking into that doll, seeing people going, that's it, like. You are inspired the whole nation that if you can do it, anybody can do it. We're looking into a house full of millionaires. That's what we're looking into. And people who probably haven't got the life experience of most people that they're making rules for. People are now making rules with no consequences. So if they're cutting the turf off and stuff like that. Like let's have no more turf, right? Eamon coming out with this stuff like he's asleep. Like we're absolutely embarrassing ourselves. That's what I feel.
Well, this was my problem when I was in King's Inn, which is the only place you can qualify to be a barrister in Ireland. So every single person in my class, without exception, lovely people, but they're all in the upper levels of the socioeconomic bracket. I was the only person in the entire class that had to take out a loan for their fees. Everyone else was handed that. So what happens, these people in law school, they go on to become barristers, they go on to become senior counsel, they go on to become judges, they go on to become policymakers. Now, there's not a massive problem with that. The only thing is, in any debate now, we only have one socioeconomic viewpoint represented. And that's what our politics has largely become. And that's why I think it's brilliant that people like you are striking out and representing another opinion. And not to say your opinion's always going to be right and theirs is going to be wrong, but that's what a healthy democracy is about, challenging opinions.
And the thing is, what you're saying there is right. Is we talk about equality and all, only in places that we're allowed. Well, don't talk about there because that matters. Like, so should there not be like some sort of bar? And I do agree with this. So there's like obviously there's a gender equality where there has to be so many females and males in positions and stuff like that. And I agree with that. You know what I mean? I think that they should be open and probably best person for the job as well. But when it comes to like say the thing, judges and stuff like that, should we have an equality process where there's so many people need to be middle class, so many people need to be working class, and it could be like, no, best person for the job. But obviously that's not the truth, because the last judge that just got appointed in our country didn't even have anybody else challenging for the job. So how can you not win the race if you're the only cyclist, if you're the only fighter in the cage? Now, and some of this stuff, where people be like, I'm not into politics. And I'm trying to say to people like that, there's a small group of people in this country for the last 100 years who have been ruling everything that's going on, and we're running out of things to take, because each generation that comes along is going to create something to take it. So when the NCT wasn't here, that got created. When the Irish War wasn't here, that got created. We're creeping into like, well, how do I get?
But, you know, it's such a difficult one, because you're in, and I often think this separates people who are having conversations and who are challenging opinions and trying to progress in self-development. You need a space to do that. And if you journey back to the very origins of entertainment, it's the Colosseum and it's gladiators fighting each other. And why did they put that together? They put it together because it was a struggling political system at the time, and they wanted to distract and stop the conversations being about politics and substantial matters. They wanted to distract the populace and have conversations about two lads killing each other inside the Colosseum. Now we have the Colosseum, but there's thousands of them. There's TikTok, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's, you know, celebrity Big Brother. Everyone's distracted by everything. And we're so distracted and caught up in this 9-to-5 rat race of trying to pay rent, trying to pay a lease on a car, trying to pay for clothes. And there's very few people in society that have, you know, through their own hard grit, through good fortune, whatever it is, they've gravitated and they've risen above that slightly. And, you know, they're not in a financial position where they need to go out and occupy all their creative energy doing someone else's work. And you can sit back and you can read the books on politics. You can read the books on history. You can question things about COVID. You can question agendas. But it's difficult to get people into that situation. When you look at who the next lawyer or who the next judge is going to be, it's difficult for them to come from working class families, because we haven't got a system that allows those working class families to get that headspace to say, okay, I'm going to put that few quid away to get little Johnny into law school down the road.
So that's what they say, when you keep people occupied by general needs, which is food and stuff. I think it's a great there's a great picture of it in history. It's like the guy is throwing bread on the floor, but the guy is behind a locked door, locked cell, but he has the keys here, and the guy is only concentrating on the food, because he's not looking at the keys, because the most important part is the bread that being thrown on the floor. To me, what I think I can do, and people are like, well, I don't, as I said, I don't really care what people's opinion of me and stuff like that. And some of the opinions I've had of me, and even on Twitter and stuff like that, are borderline racist. Like, that's just being straight. Like, look at how he says that. Look at what he says. Look at what he's wearing. Can't believe he's just wearing, you know, and I mean, like, if this was any other kind of nationality, it would be racist, right? But it's okay to be racist in a working class.
Against gingers,
yeah. You know what I mean? And then in Ireland, it's just that's I think that's been the norm for a long time, which is like, it is all right to kind of like, say, even with traveling communities and stuff like that, and all, to be like, oh, you have to watch them over there, and like, people can say them things. But so what I think I can do is, I'm not here with the answers. I am here with integrity, and I will not be compromised. I will not be compromised. You will not be able to come with me, money, fame, a threat, anything like that, and compromise me. Because, as I said, I'd rather be dead than give up that stuff, because when we get to the other side, you're going to have to face it. So, as I'm not religious, I don't go to church or anything like that, but I know that there's something going on spiritual. I know there's a spirit in here. So I can't be compromised. And what I can do in my next years in my life is, I hope that I can inspire some of the brains to show them that it is possible. I can run with that torch and say, look, we can do it. And if you sit in your garden all day smoking weed, it's not going to happen. We need to get rid of that. You need to start like looking that politics does matter, and it doesn't only matter for us, it matters for the most important people, which is the people coming after us, is our kids and all. And the real people go, look, why would I put myself out here? Why would I say the stuff I say? Why would I bring the hassle to me? I have mine. I'm all right. I could just sit back and be like, I'm all right, Jack. So what I'm trying to do is, even the people that are against me, I'm trying to get you to see, look, and we can do this. So whether you're from Jobstown or whether you're from Clontarf, you know, I think me and you could have a great conversation and we get on. I'm not saying that everybody's different and anybody's good and anybody's bad. All I'm trying to say is that we need to stop looking out for the stupid shit and we need to start looking out for the right stuff. Let's make this country where I have to say this, right, because it gets said now that people say, oh, we should be looking after our own first. I think that wording is planted to kind of separate it straight away. Right? Our own is human, all right? But it's made out that if you said that, they would say, so you're far right because you only want to look after the Irish. No, we should look after people that we bring into this country as refugees and look at the people that are in direct provision and stuff like that. Why? Because they're human. And everybody that calls this place home should get a chance to be able to live a proper life here. You can't be separating nationalities and then calling someone else racist. And then humans are humans. Let's start getting the housing thing sorted. We've got loads of land. We've got loads of resources. We've got all of the wind, all this kind of stuff. You've got data centres getting announced and made while they're telling the people not to burn their turf and their fire. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. And the reason why it is, because it's coming from people that don't live in the real world. It's coming from someone that can fall asleep on television in Dáil Éireann and keep their job. If I fell asleep in my job and I worked in the ESP or something like that, I'd probably be sacked.
If you work in the UFC,
yeah. If I fell asleep, you'd definitely be losing your job.
Paddy, you talked about the first Irish lad coming into the UFC and the success off the back of that. You and Conor just seeing that and following him. I'm a big fan of that. Can't see me, can't be me. And I think it's a nice way to end the podcast because right now you are that inspiration, whether you know it or not, for a lot of people in working class communities to strive for a little bit better, to start asking questions. So good job on that. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you, man. It's an absolute honour.
Cheers, Paddy.